Hey, shalom and blessings, everybody. Today I want to talk about marriage. I want to talk about relationships. I want to talk about God and growing together in a relationship and a marriage and along with God. I want to touch on a few other subjects as well, but I know this right now is an important topic. It's an important matter, and a lot of people have questions, especially when marriages are being tried right now. They're being tested. You're going through a lot of trials and tribulations, even in your marriage, as you are in life. You know, I've been with my wife for almost 15 years, well over a decade. I'm thankful for what God has done in our lives, how much He has grown us. And if I can, I would want to share not only personal experience, but what I've observed with others and how I work with others in marriages, and, you know, seeing the result of people that have grown and prospered in their marriages, and even those that have been on the brink of divorce and separation to the point it's about the end. Even for those that are newly in marriage or been in it a long time, you know, different situations that arise and how you can grow from that. How can you grow as a couple? How can you overcome the trials that you're presented with that are before you? And how can you live to have a happier, joyful, or peaceful life and have the marriage that God wanted you to have, a successful marriage that God had planned for your life. And maybe you have come into marriage as not what you thought it was going to be, or maybe you're new in the marriage or been in it for a long time. You feel like, I lost the love, I lost the fire that we had, that things aren't making sense right now. And you have a lot of questions, and your wife may be about to divorce, or your husband may be about to divorce, and you just feel like you're growing cold and distant away from each other. And I want to help to reignite that fire, reignite that flame, firmly root you and establish you so that you may grow into a closer relationship, not only together, but with your children and with God, that you may live a happy and joyful life that God has wanted you in this life. So I'm going to go over a few things here. You know, the first topic I wanted to touch on is gratitude. Gratitude is a very important matter in marriage. And when it comes to gratitude, you want to be thankful for what your spouse is doing. You want to be thankful for just life in general. You know, God says to be content with what you have. And if you have clothes and food, be content with those matters. You know, if a marriage is built upon money or success, goals and dreams, you're going to have a really hard relationship. But when it's set on just being content, regardless of what you have, you're not trying to people please anybody, not even in-laws and, you know, family members, that you're just putting God as first, in front row seat, and you're grateful for what your spouse, who they are. I'm going to get deeper into this matter as well, but gratitude is very important to just tell each other how thankful you are for one another. You know, nobody's going to be perfect in any marriage. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but the best thing you can do is start looking at the positives in each other and the positives in others rather than just the negatives. If you're just meditating, if you will, or pondering upon the negatives, can there ever be anything good that's going to come out of it? You want to see the positives in everyone. Another thing is scorekeeping of chores and competition with one another. You don't want to be in competition with one another saying, hey, I did more than you. I've done more in this relationship with you. Look, I did the dishwasher. You weren't doing nothing around the house. I vacuumed, I did this, I did that. You're keeping score of what someone else is doing and competing with one another of who did more than the other. If you have a relationship like this, it's going to cause a lot of troubles. It's going to cause a lot of arguments. When it comes to marriage, it's a selfless work. Love is a verb. It's an action, and it's selfless. Same when you serve God, it's selfless. You never expect anything in return, although He promises peace, love, and joy. You serve Him, never expecting anything in return. You pray for the gifts, but that gifts is to help you love God more and love others. So you don't want to keep track of score of how many things you do around the house. Just serve and do it selflessly without expecting anything in return. The next thing is you want to have a feminine and you want to have a masculine parents, meaning you want a man that has authority in the household, basically, that is masculine. A man should be masculine in the household while the woman is feminine. You don't want, the opposite roles being reversed where now the woman is leading the house and the man is, constantly changing the diapers and taking care of the kids. No, you want the man to always be a man, and the woman should allow the man to be a man, and the man should allow the woman to be a woman. So you want your kids to see a masculine and feminine role in the household to have healthy kids. Now, another thing I want to touch on is don't stop earning and desiring to love and show each other love. Don't stop trying to win each other over. You remember how you first got together when you were trying to win your spouse, when you're first dating, you first got together. Think about the love and how much dedication you put into it to win them over. Another thing is you don't want to stop trying to win their love, winning each other's love. Don't suddenly, before you got married, you were working out, trying to look good for each other, trying to eat healthy, or the way you treated each other, you see there was nothing that you did that was wrong, basically. But as time goes on, you're like, I'm done winning it, right? If you start doing that, you're going to eventually start looking at other women or men, because you're going to see somebody else. You're going to try to reignite that lust, that flame that you had in the beginning. But if you don't stop trying to earn each other's love like you did from the beginning, everything will go well. You should just be happy together. And don't stop putting in that work to just love them. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Even to show your love. You don't want to stop trying to show your love like you did from the beginning. In fact, it should be growing more and more and more as you go on to where you're like, I feel more love. I'm wanting to earn their love more, because it's just, you love them. You love them. You love each other. The other thing I want to say is don't judge marriage on happiness. You don't want to judge on how you're feeling, because happiness is not the most important thing. It is not. And of course, love is a verb. It's an action. It's not a feeling. And same with God, if you base your marriage like you do your relationship with God on happiness, you're going to turn to other things, right? You're going to try to find other things to satisfy that happiness that you're missing inside. When it comes to God, as it comes with a marriage, it's not based on happiness, how you're feeling. Love is a verb. It's an action. It overcomes all things, perseveres all things, it endures all things. And love is something that just continues on, no matter of how you're feeling, no matter of what you're going through, it presses on. So for better or worse, you continue on together, regardless of how bad it gets, no matter how good it's going, you're together and you love each other unconditionally. No matter what, you just love each other and you want to do what's pleasing and right to each other. You want to be faithful to each other. You want to be loving to each other. You're not going to, if you're looking, for example, at pornography, you're being unfaithful, you're watching unholy Hollywood movies and things like that. If your eyes are wandering, looking at another man or woman, you're on social media talking to people privately, your marriage is going to suffer. And most of the time, what I see is people blame their husband or their wife, when in reality, they're the ones with the heart condition that is unsubmissive and unsurrendered to their spouse. So, if you try to find happiness in any human being, you're not going to find it. The only happiness you're going to find is in God. So even when the trials and tribulations are coming upon you in the hard times, even in the good times, you're going to continue to endure, not only serving God, but loving your spouse no matter what. Don't expect your partner to complete you, nor your kids. You don't want to expect your kids or your partner to complete what is missing inside. Some are saying, well, I want a spouse because I want to learn to be submissive. I want to learn to love more. I want to know what respect is more. I want to know what it feels like to have somebody close to me, or something that's missing inside. Whatever the feeling, whatever you're desiring in your relationship, no human being is going to satisfy that. They're not going to feel it. They're not going to fill that void. You can't put that expectation upon any man or any woman, especially not your spouse. Happiness is something that, in completeness, is only going to come through God. It's the only way you're going to find it. You cannot expect your spouse or even your kids to complete what is missing. I often see where, people get into a new marriage and suddenly have kids. And when they have those kids, they're going to expect those kids to draw them closer as a marriage or satisfy something that's missing deep inside. You may not recognize what that is, but it's there. No kid is going to do that. In fact, there's probably going to be more division in your marriage and more disunity and more unhappiness at the moment you have kids, because you're still expecting your kids or your spouse to complete something in you that only God can, that only you can work out with Him. So again, don't expect your spouse to complete you. You got to find your respect, your love, your strength, your self-esteem, and all those things to be built up in God and the faith in Him. Another thing I want to say is don't nag and complain all the time. Don't nag and complain. I get it. There's things that in every relationship, there's going to be some sort of nagging and complaining about something, but don't make it a habit. Okay, you don't want to be continually walking around doing that. And some of us can work on those things, right? As everything I'm talking about, we all can work on. But you don't want to be continuously nagging and complaining. It's better to live on a corner of a roof than to sit in a house with a nagging wife. That's Proverbs. And there's some truth to that. You see the men that's walking around miserable because there's no happiness, because guess what? The wife is walking around nagging about every single little day. It's not going to make a happy marriage. Look at the positives, okay? Try to speak about the positives, right? The next thing I want to touch on is time and communication. Give each other time. Take not only time with God, but you want time with each other. And you want to communicate healthily. If you feel like you got to always talk over your spouse when you're communicating, or you cannot sit down and have a healthy conversation, that's a problem. You got to work on healthy communication. How is it that you can go to a job and listen to your boss speak, or somebody else that's above you speak, or anybody else at the job? You can listen to them talk, but you can't talk or listen to your spouse. And I often see that in a lot of marriages where they'll go and consume their life into a job where they think it's going to bring them happiness, or they can communicate, put their time and effort into that, and even come home and they sit there in front of a TV watching sports. Meanwhile, your spouse is suffering in the midst of it. That's not going to be a happy relationship. A happy relationship, you're going to give your time. You're going to devote your time. And in fact, you want to spend that time with your spouse. And that communication is there, because all you're going to talk about, guys, the most important thing, just like in my marriage, we're always talking about God. The most beautiful thing you can talk about in a marriage continuously is God. I don't really know what else is there to talk about. Maybe the beautiful trees, the stars that look beautiful at night, the leaves changing in the fall, in the spring, the flowers blooming, the beautiful snow, if you have it, even the beautiful mountains, the beach, like beautiful things. Talk things about that is God has created. Talk about His creation. Talk about God. Talk about the Word of God. How God is showing you things in the Bible, and grow together as a relationship and in a marriage. If God is not in the center of it, you're going to have a poor marriage. It's going to be very unhappy. Yeah, you want to make sure that you can communicate healthily, that you're not yelling, that you're not screaming at each other. You're going to have arguments. In every healthy relationship, there will be arguments. But where it becomes unhealthy is when you're yelling and degrading one another. That should not happen. You should not be throwing things. You should not be hitting one another. You should not be putting one another down. And there should not be emotional abuse, basically, or mental abuse to where you're degrading somebody, putting them down. You should be lifting them up. You should be cherishing them, caring for them. And just as you love yourself, if you don't love yourself, then maybe you need to find more love in God and find love in His Word. Not only that, but maybe you should seek biblical Christian counseling or something, Jewish counseling, something that is more healthy for you, not secular. But I think before any marriage, even in long-term marriage, sometimes you need to go to a counselor, right? Sometimes you need things later in life, especially when you have kids. Sometimes you need to go to a counselor. You're going to realize no family is healthy. I don't care how much you try to portray. You go to church and portray a perfect family. No family is perfect, and no way are you going to learn everything health in a family. And oftentimes in a marriage, I see with couples what they think, well, my family is perfect, but they put down the other spouse's family, or vice versa. It goes opposite. You're going to realize that both sides have negative and healthy traits, and you want to realize what those negative traits are and have those removed, so that you can learn to live a healthy life. And not only that, communicate and spend your time wisely in the marriage so that you can grow into a healthy tree to bear fruit, if you will. So there's nothing wrong with going to counseling. In fact, I've always said before marriage, if somebody in a marriage cannot go to counseling, they don't want to, you probably shouldn't marry that person. I'm just saying, because they're not going to want to work things out with you. They're not going to invest that time to make things grow. Not only that, when times get hard, they will probably fall away from God because they don't want to work on themselves. Their heart can grow cold. And the things that they're angry at in the past, in their childhood, will actually become more a festering pimple, if you will, a festering wound that cannot be healed. It can't be cured. People need to learn what is negative and what is, and it's in every family. I'm telling you, you're not going to be in a perfect family, no matter how much it appears. Well, my family's close together, it's healthy. Yeah, but there's some unhealthy traits that you have learned no matter what. Then you'd be surprised even going to counseling. And the closer you learn God's word, you're going to grow to know what is healthy and what is not. But the most important thing is in a family is forgiveness. If you have hate towards your brothers or sisters, your mothers or fathers for anything, I'm telling you, if you have unforgiveness, it's going to carry on all days of your life, even in your marriage. Even it's going to spread onto your children like gangrene, to where they're going to learn the same unhealthy methods. Even in families, like you often see, people don't learn boundaries, meaning they don't know what is healthy. If somebody needs time alone, maybe your parents didn't give you that time alone, say, no, you come over here and do this right now. If you're upset and you need time alone, well, you get one time alone. If you can't communicate healthily, then you need that time alone. Maybe you came up from a family that didn't talk about their problems. They're like, hey, let's just move on. Let's go on. No, you should talk about the problems. There's a rule even in my household where, if you need space, go take space and, take all the time you need. But never let the sun go down angry. We talk about it. We have forgiveness in our house, but God teaches us these things as well. But you need it healthily in a marriage. So don't be afraid to go get help at it for a counselor. And don't be afraid. I'm not saying just go to those free counselings that are secular. You want to go to a Christian or a Jewish one where you're going to have morals and values that's going to help lead you in the right way. And then when you seek God and pray and seek Him with our heart, soul, and mind, He's going to lead you on the right path and show you what is not right and what is right. And when you pray to be changed for God, change something within you, you're going to say, God, I want to change this in me. You're not saying, well, I know this needs to change, but I'm not really going to earnestly pray for it. No, if you really want to change, you're going to pray for it. You're going to want to change. Just like you change your clothes, you don't want to be in stinky clothes. Well, if you don't want to be in stinky clothes, change your clothes into clean clothes. In the same way, cry out to God the same way. You want to remove what is unhealthy or what is sinful so that you can put on what is clean, like the garments and what smells good, which is not a stench to your spouse and to God. Does that make sense? Another thing I want to talk about is gentleness and respect. We also want to have the fruits of the Spirit. Your fruits of the Spirit is love, it's joy, it's peace, it's patience, it's kindness, it's generosity, it's faithfulness, and it's gentleness, and it's self-control. I'm going to say that you want to have gentleness with each other. You want to have respect. I noticed because I grew up in the South, in America. I've never been in any place in the entire world, in many places I've been, where there's so much respect, not only for the elderly and your parents, but for one another. And even in a relationship. I mean, when I was growing up, what did I learn? Of course, my parents, they're from, up north, so the Northeast. So you're going to realize that they have a lot more tougher mentality. They're very tough. They come off some kind of rugged and rude, but there's a lot of respect. I was taught growing up, you don't put your elbows on the table when eating. You put your napkin in your lap. There's a certain way that you set your silverware. My parents were very organized in that way. And not only that, but they taught to open the doors. You treat your spouse with respect, just as you did women. Don't ever hit a woman. But now you got women today wanting to be men that they don't care whether they're hit or not. I'm not saying to hit them, but I'm saying that the feminist movement is killing marriages. A man should be masculine. A woman should be feminine. Don't lose that innocence, females. But also men, don't go over them and rule over your spouse of a female or any female as I'm better than you because I'm a man. Okay, I'll get into this in a minute. I was taught so much respect. And you're going to learn in the South, I learned that people have more respect anywhere else, especially relationships. If I go to places, for example, like New York, Chicago, LA, in Detroit, St. Louis, for example, I go to some of these other places, there is not as much respect like the mannerisms in a marriage. There's not that gentleness, that kindness, that selfless love. It's almost like it's lost. For example, like I notice a lot of times today, if you saw a pregnant woman walk into a room and the seats are filled up, get your fat butt up and give them the seat, right? That's the way it should be. Give the woman your seat that's pregnant. It's likewise an elderly person, give them your seat. That's the respect that I was raised up to taught. Of course, I was taught up in God's ways to know what is right and what was wrong, how to treat each other in the Torah. I learned these things, what is respect and morality, but I've noticed in a lot of other cities, it's lost, that just simplicity of respect and gentleness and generosity to one another. Respect goes a long ways. You hear that song, R-E-S-P-E-C. What do you think it means to me? I don't know. What does it mean to you? Respect. There's no I in us. And there's no I in team. You got to be a team and you got to think of us together. You become one flesh. You want to love each other, treat each other as you want to be treated. Be selfless. It has to go both ways. Stop finger pointing at one another saying, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. So are you keeping tabs? You keeping records? God keeps no records of wrong unless you continue in sin, right? He has a book of remembrance for everything you've ever done, but you don't want to open that book. You want to be in the Lamb's book of life. In the same way, you want to be one heart, one soul, one mind. Something that I often get, and my wife, is you two speak a lot alike. You guys act the same. You guys talk the same. Because, why? Because my wife is submissive to me. She allows me to lead. In fact, she has prayed to be one with me to a point to where she fasted and she was praying earnestly to be one with me, that God would bless her the same way that he has blessed me. As a result, God has made us one. And as a result, we're growing as one, working together as one. God is blessing so much. And the thing that goes back to Genesis, the man's punishment and curse is to work all the days of his life, toiling and sweating with thorns and thistles. It's going to be hard. Women, it's going to be what? Child labor, endurance of raising up children, if you will. And not only that, but the pain through giving childbirth. But not only that, you're going to have a war against you to desire to have authority over your man. And if you put that into check and you humble yourself, I guarantee you God's going to bless you. But if you wanted to be feminist and you're always accusing your husband of this and that, he's abusive, this and that, well, maybe you're abusive. I don't know. Have you ever taken a look? Have you ever gone to a counselor and gotten help and said, without one-sided opinions or trying to tell a one-sided story, but being open, say, I messed up here, I know I'm wrong here, and this is going on with my spouse. It's always two sides. It's not just one side. And anytime I've talked with people or said, hey, my husband, or hey, my wife, I know if they can't say I admit that they're wrong in any way, that I know that where the problem lies. It's two-sided street. It takes two to tango. And one person isn't tangoing, and the other two people aren't tangoing. They're too busy dancing with other people. Again, it goes back to that gentleness and that respect. I guess you don't want to lose another thing. You don't want to lose fun together, having fun. You don't want to do the same boring thing. As time goes on in marriages, you can be inept to just be boring and continue the same thing that you ever had. If you heard anything about the Myers-Briggs personality types, and now I don't get into Enneagrams, that's satanic, but Myers-Briggs, there are certain types. For example, SJs are a certain type. They like things that are, they're sensing and judgers, meaning they like the same routine over and over again. They don't like the change. While there's others that are perceivers and intuitives that like to do things spontaneously and like change, like adventure. And one thing that is beautiful. Wives, what's so hard about letting your husbands go out and an adventure? In fact, most men have an adventurous side to them. They always want to go out and adventure. So let them go out. There's nothing wrong with that. But if they're trying to go to the bar and go get drunk and things like that and live unholy, men, stop it. Stop it. Be faithful to your spouse. What I'm talking about is go jump in a lake. Go climb a tree for that matter. Go rock climbing if you want. Ride a bike down a giant hill. Go skydiving. Men, go do something. Wives, don't contain them and say, you need to help me change this diaper. I don't know, maybe you should change a diaper. Maybe you should go out and learn to have fun with your spouse. Maybe you should do more fun with your family instead of putting your kids in the soccer and basketball and football that has no purpose and nothing. I want my kid to be the best ballerina and gymnast in the world. You better lose that dream and goal right now. I'm telling you, spend time as a family, enjoy nature. Enjoy nature, guys. Don't enjoy buying and shopping and doing all these worldly activities of sports. Go out together as a family and explore. Go out on adventures together as a family. If you have kids and if you're with a spouse, don't lose that love. Do new things. Be spontaneous. Don't get boring. Laugh together and be happy. Don't just have your head down and cry and be sad all the time. Go out and laugh with each other. Make jokes. There's one thing with me, like you and my wife, we joke a lot. We're just goofy sometimes. We laugh a lot, more than what people ever see. We laugh a lot. We enjoy a lot of life together in the simple things and even in the great things, right? Don't think negatives of sex or be ashamed. It's something that I often see. People are often ashamed or like they feel like disgusting or something when it comes to sex. Don't. Women, you should actually be wanting to give it to your man. Like, you should actually be wanting to give it to your man. I often see in relationships where they're like, well, I don't know, I feel ashamed when I do certain things, or I don't feel like it's right, like even with an orgasm, I feel like it's wrong, I feel like I can't do those things because I feel unholy. Well, I grew up in a household that was very open about it, especially my father. Very open about certain things. Even if I had any questions, he was very open. In our household, it's the same way. You don't want to feel ashamed because it's not a shameful thing if it's within marriage. It's actually holy. And keep the marriage bed undefiled. I'm not telling you to bring in toys. I'm not telling you to bring in dildos. I'm not telling you to do these things. I'm not telling you to watch porn. In fact, that should not even be done. It's a marriage bed defiled. What you do behind closed doors in your bed and such, love each other's bodies. Care for. Don't worry about, well, I don't think this is right. This is wrong. Love each other. There's some religious groups out there that'll say, well, according to the Torah or the law, you're always supposed to do it to procreate. Listen, God gave it for us to enjoy each other, and it's pure if it's between a man and a woman. Outside of that, it's unholy. A man and a woman that is married. Outside of that, it's unholy. It's unclean. Don't be ashamed of sex. Don't think negative of it. There's a lot of times that people feel like, especially with women, they feel like it's not good to do it all the time. It doesn't matter whether you do it 10 times in a day with your spouse or once every week if everybody's different. But I can tell you, women usually want to be heard and respected. And men usually want food, sex, and to be respected. Now, women, sex is just as important as you want to be heard. And men, your wife wanting to be heard and respected is just as important as you're wanting to be respected. You want food and you want sex. I'm just saying what's the generalized statement for most men. And don't be ashamed of sex. A woman should be wanting to give it. Don't get in the motion of, oh, well, we're so busy, I'm so tired that I have no time to give it. Don't get in that motion. Make time for it. It should be a joy, actually. It should be as important as you eating food, right? As important as you're exercising or as important as whatever you're doing in life. You want to make sure that you're giving that time and making time for that. If you stop having sex or you stop doing these things, you're going to fall farther apart. One of the things that I notice a lot of times in marriage is there's usually one that is a feeler, a very emotional. There's one that is not. They're usually a lot more. They're more analytical or perceivers are different, but there's usually one or the other. Now you got to learn each other's love language. The big thing that I see is quality time. Another thing I see is physical touch and intimacy, sexual intimacy, and another one is words of affirmation. Yeah, and of course there's gift giving, like giving flowers, things like that. There's acts of service for, doing chores around the house for one another. One may find a lot of love in you vacuuming the floor for them. And another one taking out the trash or something. But the biggest ones are quality time. Men, don't come home and watch sports. Give that time to your wife. Husbands and wives, don't give all the time to your kids and you have no time for each other. Don't neglect holding hands, kissing each other, hugging each other. It's one thing even in my household. Like my wife and I, we kiss every day, hug every day, tell each other that we love each other every day, how much we appreciate each other every day. If you cannot do that, your marriage is going to drown. Now, don't be jealous of another person's marriage. Don't look at another's through the lens of how you want your marriage. Well, if you're on social media, that's why it's so toxic, because you're like, look, they just went to the Bermuda. Well, they just went to, Europe, but I don't see you going to Europe. You start pointing the finger. Well, stop looking at your life through the lens of other people's lives, because that's envy, that's jealousy, that's lust, and your marriage is going to drown. Why don't you go together and say, like, why don't we do something new? Why don't we go somewhere? If your spouse is like, well, I'm content just going to work. Well, maybe because your household is a mess. You're not creating a safe, peaceful and joyful environment, ladies, to where your husband comes home, feels like he can relax and just rest with you. It's a crazy environment because you're expecting your husband to come home. You don't ever change the diaper of little Louisa. I don't know, maybe change the diaper. Maybe the woman should change the diaper. Maybe you guys work together. I don't know. Why don't you think about the man that's working? Maybe you both are working, so work together. I remember this one guy's like, love this guy. Very blunt. He's a Jewish guy. He told me, he's like, oh, do you help your wife at home? Do you help her around the house? Yeah, I do. So you vacuum, you do the dishwasher, you help these things? Yeah, I do. He's like, good. Because there's a lot of lazy sack of, I ain't gotta say it, but that men that won't even do that because they think a woman should have her feet up to the sink and only go to the kitchen, to the laundry room, to the, see what I'm saying, to the bedroom. That's not the reality. Both should be working together to make each other's life easier. It's a team effort, guys. And men, you should be seeking to help your wife and your husband. But wives, don't just wait for your husband to get home and you just go lay your fat butt on the bed. I'm sorry if I said fat. I'm not trying to offend anybody there. But what I'm saying, don't lay your down on the bed or the couch and go watch TV and spend time on social media. Why don't you spend time with your husband? Why don't you spend time with your wives, guys? Make an effort. You should find joy in this. Why is it you can find so much joy in sports or social media or your TV, but you cannot find joy in your spouse? Why are you finding so much joy in your in-laws, with your mother and your father or your brother or sister or whatever, your family, outside of your husband and wife and your kids if you have them? Guys, you should learn to have fun together. Don't do the same boring things. It's like I said, there's certain times and certain people in Myers-Briggs that are SJs, that are censors and judges, where they want to do the same thing over and over again and with no change. If you don't have change, you don't have spontaneous, you don't have adventure, what a boring marriage. Guys, talk about it. Have fun together. Do things together. Don't laugh together. You don't want to lose that fun. You don't want to lose that laughter. You want to continue to make jokes with each other and have fun. Don't put each other down, but lift each other up. In Judaism, a woman is a man's possession. Women, don't forget that. You don't have authority over your husband, and men don't gloat that over your wives as if I'm all powerful. Now I'm going to beat my wife and treat her disrespectfully. No, treat her kindly. And cherish her and love her the way she's ought to be. The important thing is the fruits of the Spirit. And ladies, if you lose what God has ordained, if you have that feminist spirit, if you're wanting to take authority over your household and rule over your children, you should be working together as a husband and wife. Children see weaknesses. And if they see, well, mommy or daddy disagrees on this, so I'm not going to do this. Well, maybe you should learn to agree. Even if it's spanking like once or twice, it's not going to be harm. But if you start beating your kid, that's wrong. That's abuse. So what I'm trying to say is work together. Women, don't take authority over your husbands. But husbands, you should be following God with our heart, soul, and mind. You may be on an ungodly relationship, but I'm telling you, try to work it out. I'm not telling you to continue to be beat and abused by your husband physically or sexually abused. I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you to stay in that, but I'm also not going to tell you it's right to go. You can't marry somebody else. You can't divorce your husband and go marry somebody else. It's against God's word, and I'll get into that later. But what I'm saying is be submissive, but I often see that women are like, I see a better man over here. Yeah, because your heart's going to long for that. It's adultery, okay? Men, if you're looking at other women, it's adultery, okay? If you're wanting to have sex with them, if you're wanting a different spouse, it's adultery. You got to have fruits of the Spirit. And that's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And, I'm going to get into more later. But, my wife prayed to be one with me. And it's a beautiful prayer. She wanted to be fully submissive and, fully one. As a result, God has blessed her so much and blessed me. We blessed our marriage, and unfortunately, I see a lot of marriages out there where we have given advice. For example, it's not just us, but people that are like us. God says not to marry a foreigner. And there's people that have married those that have hated what I've spoken or have taught. Meanwhile, the spouse or the one that loved what I was teaching, they fell away because they married the one that hated what I was speaking. And now as a result, their marriage is drowning. They've gone into other beliefs, other ways, and they're unhappy. They're a mess because their spouse, they thought they were caught up in liking this person that didn't really follow God. I've always said, if somebody does not love God's commandments and fully agree with all of it, and you're like, which commandments? I don't know, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. If they don't agree with that, then they're not going to treat you well. They're not going to follow God. Likewise, pagan holidays. I always encourage my kids, don't go with somebody that thinks that these things are okay, that's not willing to change. If somebody's willing to change from these ways, good. They're going to treat you with love and respect. But you also want somebody that believes in the fruits of the Spirit, that believes in the grace of God and His salvation. You want somebody that is fully submissive to God, and they're going to be fully submissive to you. And maybe you're in a relationship that's not, but I want to tell you to keep praying. There's power in prayer, and there's power in faith, and believing that things will be changed. Keep the faith. God wants you to have a peaceful and loving and joyful marriage. He wants you to be happy, if you will, with Him. He wants you to be joyful in a marriage, have a peaceful marriage so that you will grow closer and grow with Him. A marriage is like a relationship with God. The more that you submit to God, the more you will submit to each other. The more you submit to God, the more you will love each other. The more you learn and grow in faith in His Word, His whole entire Word from Genesis to Revelation, the more you're going to grow in God's Word, in faithfulness, in peace, and love, and joy, as well as the fruits of the Spirit. You can read things like 1 Corinthians 7, 1 Timothy 5, and things like that. I'll get into things later. But what matters? You can try to be a Proverbs 31 woman, but if you're trying to do all that without growing in faith with God and learning His Word and being submissive and gentle and having the fruits of the Spirit and praying for these things earnestly, it's not going to help you one bit. What I'm telling you is you got to submit to God, and He, as a result, things will go well with you. Guys, if you have any rebellion in your heart and like you have a hard time praying or reading anymore, you can't read His Word, you feel like you don't want to, or you're having trouble praying, or whatever the matter is, you're going to have a hard time submitting to God. The more you delight in His Word, in prayer, in reading it, and submitting to it, and growing in it, and trying to learn it, so it fills your heart, soul, and mind, you're going to grow with God and closer to God. And as a result, your marriage will flourish in the way that God wanted it to become. So shalom and God bless you.